Okay, so it's 3:30 here in the United Kingdom, and so we'll start our security thought leadership webinar this time on what is the security sector, why is it being ignored by governments during this emergency, or is it? Now, thought leadership is an important part of thinking differently about the security sector. And one of the crucial things we do in the world of security is taking the time to think about what's going on now to get a better type of security in the future. And we're very dependent on the support of our audiences around the world, of our panelists, and indeed our sponsor. And today, CIS Security are supporters of this webinar. Thank you very much indeed to them. What we will be doing in a second is we'll be coming to each of the panelists and asking them to introduce themselves. And once they've done that, each of them will be asking them for their opening statement. And our panelists today come from the United States of America, Canada, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. Each of them in different ways has an expertise and a contribution to make. And the idea is today that we ask for their views and then we get questions from you and we debate these issues. So at the bottom of your screen is a question and answer button. Can I ask you please to ask your questions on that so that we know where they are? I will endeavour to ask as many of those as I can, either directly or by incorporating them into other questions. Thank you very much indeed. So let's get going and let's meet our panel. Let's start off with you, Glenn.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as the case may be. Dr. Glenn Kitteringham, CPP, and I am president and owner of Kitteringham Security Group, and I'm located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
And Neil.
Hello, everyone. My name is Neil Catton. I'm the managing director of CIS Security based in London.
And Sandy, we haven't got a picture of you, Sandy, but we'll be able to hear you. Sandy.
Very well. Good day to all. My name is Sandy Davies, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Foundation for Protection Officers located in Naples, Florida. The IFPO is an international training and education provider that has developed a number of industry-recognized certification programs for the security industry around the world.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandy. People know about IFPO. They may well know about you as well, and they'll know a lot more in a few minutes' time. And finally, Declan from Ireland, but based out in the Middle East at the moment. Declan, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Declan Gowers. I'm Director of the Security Institute of Ireland.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm going to ask each of the panel for their opening statement. That's just 3 minutes for them to give their views about whether the governments are ignoring the security sector. So, starting off with you, Glenn.
Okay. So the first thing that I want to clarify, though, is when I talk about ignoring, I have no doubt at all that government is utilizing the private security industry, but by ignoring, I view that as if they see the security sector as an active partner who can provide input into the management of this pandemic. And the thing that I want to say is, sitting here in Calgary, Alberta, first thing I want to say is that the private security industry does have a terrific partnership with the City of Calgary and the Calgary Emergency Management Agency. We're one of many partners with CEMA, and we've been actively involved since 2012. And as well, the City of Calgary Corporate Security Department is actively engaged. There's a number of quasi-public or semi-public, semi-private public organizations like critical infrastructure, power generation, utilities and whatnot. They're all involved. So I see us as having a very good active partnership. But in conversations that I've had with security practitioners from across the country, I'm getting the distinct impression that we're one of the few jurisdictions where there is this partnership going on. And this is what I am curious to know if this is going on anywhere else, whether in Canada or across the world. So quite frankly, I hope I'm wrong. But the impressions I'm getting is that the partnership that we have here in Calgary is quite unique.
Thank you very much indeed, Glenn. Let me now go to Neil. Neil, your opening statement, please.
I'm not really close enough really to know about the attitude of government towards the security sector, but the fact that key worker status was given to security personnel, I think that's an indication that there is some recognition, but I don't think that's enough. My view of what our teams do on the front line deserves more respect, I think. Look back at my time when I was a security officer, things have changed a hell of a lot since then. And now the environments that our staff work in are far more challenging, dealing with aggressive people, beggars, mental health issues, aggressive gangs, supporting cordons during acts of terrorism, and most recently supporting the COVID-19 at hospitals and protecting members of the health service. So there's a lot that's going on. I don't think that's really recognised as much by government. I very much like the police service as well. I don't think that gets what it deserves from that point of respect. But I've heard a lot of statements in the news about key workers, but I don't think I've heard security mentioned in those statements. So I've heard about delivery drivers and shop assistants and things like that, which are all very important. But at the end of the day, we're keeping the organisation safe, we're keeping them running. And I think the government should take this opportunity to acknowledge that. And I'm a bit disappointed that that's not happened. Looking ahead, what's going to happen? Social distancing, we are going to play a large part of that as an industry. Numbers are going to increase as people get back to the new normal, and who's going to govern that? Who's going to manage those situations? Tensions are going to rise, more people out in the environment, trying to keep social distancing. And I think, you know, we will be part of that, the whole security industry, whether that's technology, whether it's people, whatever that might be. And I'm sure government will set those guidelines out, and we will be really enforcing that, or trying to. Our numbers are compelling from a security industry compared to the police. We far outweigh their resources. I don't think that's taken into account. And of course, after all, the saying at the moment is stay safe. Well, we actually do that. We are doing that as an industry along with the police and the services. And again, I don't quite think that's getting the recognition it deserves. Finally, from me, should we be careful for what we wish for? I don't know. We've always been very much under the radar, the private security industry that I'd like to think I represent. Recognition is important. I think it's getting more so with our clients. I think it's getting more so with members of the public. But do we want to be held up to public scrutiny like the police do, where 1,000 pieces of good work can be undone by one piece of work that probably didn't go the way the individual thought it would do? So should we stay behind the scenes and do our job in that sort of way? Maybe yes. But then what I think that does, it doesn't raise the profile. It keeps us very much in the background. And to attract, bring new talent in that's going to take the industry forward and develop it, we can't do that. We've got to be open. We've got to be out there. We've got to be seen as an exciting industry to join. And I think as long as we have strong relationships with the police and other services, and we have the support of the SIA, and probably more support there and more pushing to really raise the profile, I think we can, you know, be seen as what we are, blow our own trumpet for a real force for good and what we do.
Thank you very much indeed, Neil. And let me come to Sandy. Sandy, your opening statement, please.
Okay, very well. Have local and national governments around the world turned a blind eye to the important role security personnel are playing in the COVID-19 crisis? I will focus on the United States, where it appears that, for the most part, COVID-19 or not, government's attitude of ignorance towards private security has not changed very much. The federal government is concerned with the security of its citizens and the safety of its infrastructure, while it appears to have continued its laissez-faire approach to businesses, leaving the private sector to deal with its own security, which is where the private security industry comes into play. An example of private security being utilized by state government would be the issue of state-owned liquor stores in Pennsylvania. Government Tom Wolf closed the state's more than 600 stores in March and then decided to slowly reopen them with curbside delivery in late April. And when the delivery started, an employee would bring the liquor to the customers waiting in the vehicles. Meanwhile, a private security officer hired by the state stood guard to make sure that the delivery went smoothly and the employee was safe at all times. But that's just one example. In many other cases, it appears as though the security may truly be the forgotten soldiers of an invisible empire. One has to wonder how this is possible with over 1 million private security officers in the United States, a number that dwarfs the number of public law enforcement personnel by a margin of more than 2 to 1. But instead of turning to the security industry in a time of a national crisis, more than 17,000 National Guard troops have been activated in all 50 states, some of them taking on quasi-law enforcement roles. According to the USA Today, National Guard members assisted police in Rhode Island in pulling over motorists entering the state from New York, a distinction that was later expanded to any state. Certainly the scores of laid-off security officers across the nation could have fulfilled these roles, allowing them at least some temporary unemployment. While some states experience a serious add in security opportunities, there was a corresponding flow in other parts of the country as concerns grew over an increase in crime, particularly in the looting of closed businesses. Those businesses are now learning what William Webster, former FBI and CIA director, said. Security is always seen as too much until they say it's not enough. What governments may not realize is the drastic systemic evolution the security industry has undergone in the last few decades. Yes, some states require security officers to be licensed, but others don't. Is it possible that politicians need to be lobbied to establish a stringent national standard? But since this does not seem to be even the faintest gleam in any politician's eye, the responsibility of employing qualified security professionals has fallen to individual security companies. To close off, we in the security industry must continue to strive towards pushing a positive image of the security industry so that the industry can be viewed as a credible partner to local and federal governments. Thank you.
Sandy, thank you very much indeed. Sandy, when you're not on the screen, can you just mute because you're appearing occasionally when others are speaking? Thank you, Sandy. That was you certainly put a case there. I appreciate that. And finally, in terms of opening statement, let me go to Dr. Declan Garrett. Declan.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to frame my opening statement around 3 questions that were posed earlier, which is around the attitude of government towards the security sector. And I think what's important to begin with is understanding what do we mean when we say the security sector. The security sector over the last few decades has grown substantially. We tend to continue to talk about the private security sector as the security guards. And if we just focus on those for now, in this time of crisis, I don't believe that the attitude of government towards the security sector has changed in any way. I don't think it's got any better or got any worse. I would say maybe arguably that there's a certain taking for granted. But if you look at what the security sector is currently doing during COVID, it has almost become a business enabler for a lot of organizations to remain open, such as healthcare, facilities, hospitals, etc. It's also become a business enabler for organizations to close places that need security guards to stay overnight and keep people and sites safe, etc. But attitude to government, I don't think will have changed in any way. I think it's all taken for granted. I think one of the interesting ones we look at from the security sector is we look at the cyber security sector. That in itself has had a lot of I suppose, not as much attention, even though we've had a lot of issues between whether it be Zoom, whether it be Microsoft Teams, all these threats that have occurred. So I think one of the things we need to understand is what do we actually talk about? We talk about security and where do we talk about, who are we talking about? The extent to which security play an important role to government, I think they're a strategic partner. If you look at how the world has changed in terms of outsourcing and how it's outsourced the security sector over the last probably 2 decades, it's immense. Most of the key services have been outsourced, which includes security. Without the security sector, I'm not sure a lot of societies would be secure today. So I think there's a certain level of, again, taking them for granted, but maybe not realizing the importance that they play. And then the potential for security to play a bigger role and by the means of doing so. Absolutely, I think they have the opportunity to play a bigger role. I think government have the opportunity to provide them with a bigger role, but I think there's an issue here where government are probably the biggest buyers of security and they tend to go for the lowest price, and that then creates its own problem by not being able to develop and invest in the people that provide this service. So there's a bit of a catch-22 situation there. That's my general opening statement, Matt.
Declan, thank you very much indeed. And I appreciate all the panel for your views. So let's start the questions going. I wonder as an opener whether I could put this question up. Maybe I'll come to Neil first. Neil, as you said, security has been acting under the radar. Who can be surprised if it doesn't speak up in times that are good about how good it is and what it's doing, how can we possibly be surprised that when things go to bad, it's overlooked?
No, no, very true, very true. I think what we've been doing is really putting a lot of information out, and I think that's what security companies can be doing now about how we deal with the COVID situation, what we're doing to support our staff, and I think lots of companies are doing a really good job of that, and then pushing that out. I know some of our customers are using some of the work that we're putting out for our media and what to do. And it is being prepared for what's going to happen next, which is what we're all working on at the moment, what that looks like and what part we can play. How we can really, as we call it, blow our own trumpet about this and get it out there. I don't have the answers to it, apart from us, everybody putting collective efforts together. We put together, We've Got Your Back media, really piece of work to recognize security staff, and it had a lot of support from the security industry, Security Institute, lots of different organizations, and we've just got to keep doing it. I think it's more and more, be more comfortable with it. There's a lot more united company organizations now. I'm part of the City Security Council, and there's a lot of good work happening there to really try and promote the industry. I think we just need that extra little push. Maybe someone in the media world that's very high profile can give us a good bit of support. It's a sad state, but it is what it is. We probably need something that's on prime time or something like that recognizes what we do.
Sandy, can I ask you the same question? I mean, you put the case very well, I thought, about where security is, but surely it's just getting what it deserves. I mean, it hasn't placed itself in a position where it's high profile enough to be seen as a credible partner. It was an absolute inevitability that the situation you described would be the case. Your thoughts, Sandy?
Well, I totally agree that over the number of decades that I've been in the industry, the industry's been plagued with a negativity, the night watchman, the guard, you know, all of these things has impacted the industry significantly, and I don't think we looked at seriously upon the agencies, either locally, state, or nationally. I don't think they have a confidence in us as an industry to be able to provide the services that they're requesting. However, as I mentioned in my opening comment, the industry has really evolved. I mean, the professional security officer in the 21st century is different to the officers in the 1960s to the year 2000, per se. I think that after 9/11, for example, that there was an emphasis or a focus from the end users that wanted educated and well-equipped, knowledgeable officers. So I think that we are evolving as an industry. I think that we have a long ways to go, and I certainly hope before I retire that I'll see that there will be some sort of collective efforts by licensing bodies, state regulators, and our industry to fold in with the security industry. We should and actually enhance each other. That's probably not the best word, but I mean, we can really, I think, work synergistically. I think that we have to continue to do what we do to raise the bar and to provide well-turned-out security personnel. I think we need to do some research or a security officer role delineation study so that we can better determine what the roles are, so that we can better equip these officers, so that, again, we will be looked upon in a greater light by outsiders of the industry.
Thank you, Sandy. Glenn, I've got a question here in advance from Joe, based in India. And he says that there's been frontline recognition campaigns in India, but because security has not been able to quantify its efforts sufficiently, he wonders whether that's been the problem in getting recognition on the scale it deserves. I suppose I asked you to answer that question, and then in the same breath say, what have you done right in Canada? Your opening statement was a bit different.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So how do we quantify it? I agree that one of our shortcomings as an industry is that we're not very good at blowing our own horn, so to speak. And I think we got to get a lot better at it. And I don't mean in a bragging sort of way. I just mean to let people know of the value that we bring, to society as a whole. But then that comes down to numbers and the collection of data and analysis. And quite frankly, that's not a lot of security people are doing that now. And I'll go on for quite some time why I believe that to be true. I think part of the foundation of all of this is we as an industry are just, any standards that we have are completely voluntary, and most people don't want to follow our own standards, our own industry standards. So I think that's one of the issues. And I hope I've answered the question from the gentleman, but the other issue is, so what did we do in Alberta, in Calgary? This does sound like we're bragging, or I'm bragging, but I worked right across the country, and I do firmly believe there is something about Alberta particularly where there's a high degree of interaction between the public and private sector, and there's a high degree of community, so to speak. And so when the CEMA, the Calgary Emergency Management Agency in the city of Calgary, reached out to the private sector several years ago, that was the foundations for that were laid previously, where we just had a good working relationship with them. And then we signed an MOU with them, and then we were working. And quite frankly, the first time we were activated was the 2013 Southern Alberta flood, and we proved ourselves. And we proved that collectively that we had a lot to contribute to how the city was managing that event. And basically, we act as a pipeline between the government and the private sector, the commercial real estate sector, and vice versa. And we just showed there was a lot of value there. And obviously, the emergency managers recognized what we brought to the table. And then the city of Calgary also has a very professional and devoted corporate security department. And they've really, they're led by some real professionals, and they've shown the value of what they bring to the table as well. So I think one of the things is partly what we have to do is we have to be able to show that we can deliver. And I think until we create standards that we all adhere to, we're going to have a hard time. It's going to be an uphill battle. So.
Thank you very much, Declan. Let me pick up on that issue with Declan. Declan, Nicole Ludovic has asked a question, and she mentions that very point Glenn was just raising there. And I think one of the key good points about security, as she says, the fundamentals are the same all over the world. And you know a bit about this. But in the absence of some sort of recognized standard to work to, you're always on an uphill struggle, perhaps. And therein rests a challenge around the world in its different ways. Declan.
Yeah, I would agree, Martin. I would agree with what the previous speakers have said also. In terms of how we communicate to the public, I think this is part of the problem. We tend to communicate in the wrong way, and most of the security sector that the public know about are those that they meet on a day-to-day basis, usually in the wrong situation. They meet them at nightclubs when the bouncer type people where they say you can't do something. They meet them when they go to the shopping malls. They meet them typically in the wrong way. Normally the security guard is telling them you can't do something. And that message is not good. Then we've had a lot of high profile negative stories, whether it be out of Panorama or through the media in other ways, that have not shown the security sector in a good light either. So we struggle to sell ourselves. But going back to the question in terms of global standards, etc., I think one of the issues that we have is we need to get the people to sell the sector, people that actually work in it. And the security guards, etc., that work in this sector, they struggle with career paths, they struggle with meaning, they struggle with purpose. And to provide anybody with a meaningful career, you need to provide them with meaning and purpose. A lot of cases, what we do is we just provide them with jobs, and there's no sense of moving forward. We struggle with attracting, we struggle with retaining, and we don't get the best out of people. So I think we need to get the people to sell the security sector as a positive sector to work in. I think if you look at the turnover rates and you speak to most security staff, it's not a career, it's something that they go in and come out of because it suits them at that time, whether they need money at the time, whether they're on a second career. et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is one of the issues. One of the areas as well is we don't have standardized qualification frameworks across the world, and we don't have standardized career pathways. And for me, I go back to meaning and purpose. Provide people with meaning and purpose, and you might find that the security staff that want to enter the security sector might actually sell it better than a lot of us are selling it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. A question here from Eddie Sorrells, and Eddie makes the point that going forward, there are obviously new opportunities, and I'm keen to just make sure we dwell on this, both sides of the coin. In every crisis, there's always big opportunities. And Neil, you're in your opening statement alluded to this, and it's sort of cropped up in different ways in previous webinars. You mentioned a social distancing, I think, and enforcing that. There's also the issue of checking temperatures of employees as they're entering buildings. What do you see, Neil, as the case for security going forward? Are we laying the foundations for it to be very different and very much more visible, as Declan was saying, perhaps going forward? Or do you think it'll be back to business as normal? Your thoughts? You're on mute, Neil.
Now, you said that would happen.
I did say
it. No, I think the visibility and I think the profile is going to be more significant. You will see more security personnel in a lot of different environments now, where it used to be, I think, Declan, as you touched on, the guys that might be approaching you when you don't want to be approached. I think we've got to get across that we're there to be safe. This stay safe thing for me is really what we should be grasping. We are keeping safe. The safe bit, more than the security, is probably where we need to be raising our profile. Because we will be doing, I'm expecting to be doing a lot more of that. And that could be us, you know, because you're going to get situations where people don't feel comfortable because people aren't staying safe and they're not keeping their distance. So it's the way the professional security officer, and I think we have got good standards, and I think we do extremely well in the UK, from my knowledge, how we have standards of security staff, the way we train, and very much it's about that customer service approach to security. It is that asking people to do things in the way where they do it because they realize it's the best and safest way to do it. And I think more of that is going to become evident, more customer service, more training, more face-to-face guidance of employees. And I think touching on the key to this is the new blood coming in. We have to get new people coming in that see it as a career. And I agree with a couple of comments previously. We need the case studies, we need the people, we need the examples of how interesting and how you can be responsible for saving lives, administering first aid, helping a child to find their parents when they're lost, things like this. I think people want a bit of that now. They want a bit of purpose. They want purpose in what they do. And I think we've got exactly the right industry and job to actually to get that across, and we'll be looking for more people that can do that. So I think certainly there's a lot of future ahead for a lot of people to join the sector.
Thank you. Sandy, I'm going to come to you with the same point. I mean, obviously an opportunity going forward, one would think, certainly given the foundation that you outlined in your opening statement. Where do you see the new opportunities for the security sector in the post-COVID world?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think we're sort of dismissing a big portion of the new normal. I think that the economic climate is going to struggle in the future, and I think that there's going to be a lot of demand placed on law enforcement. So I think that with proper education and training, again, there's going to be many opportunities for security personnel in terms of, you know, the social distancing, just all of those. We don't know what the future holds there in terms of what requirements are going to be needed, but I'm certain that security can step up and assist, and there'll be more opportunities for them. I think additionally too, which I'm finding very exciting, is the people that are entering into the security industry right now come from a different background. We've got newcomers from universities, colleges who have studied perhaps, you know, IT or they're you know, they're coming in from a different background, and I think they're going to lend a lot of opportunities as well moving forward to bridge the gap between security, the old security, and law enforcement. So I think that this new breed, this 21st century officer, can fill a role of many tasks that has been done by, which is currently being done by law enforcement.
Sandy,
So
Sandy, is your sense that clients are going to be prepared to pay for the sorts of people who can have a career in security? I mean, it's back to Declan made in his opening statement, and it's been made on other webinars, that there's not, the willingness sometimes comes from the very best in security, it always does in fact, but the clients aren't always there prepared to pay. Sandy, is your sense that post-COVID-19 world that will be better?
Yes, I do sense that. I think that it's going to become obviously more apparent that there are going to be greater needs in the workplace, in the facilities, or what have you. And I think that by all means they're prepared to pay for what, you know, they're going to get what they pay for, really, at the end of the day. And I think that they want a safer environment. They want somebody that is knowledge-based. And I think that I definitely feel that the end user will pay for a good, safe work environment.
Thank you, Sandy. Glenn, a few people, and I know this subject's close to yours and Declan's heart, the issue of training, but you in particular is part of your core component of your PhD. Some questions, a few of the questions, Monish Gulati, I hope I pronounced that right, Monish, is talking about training being a key issue, both for motivation, as Neil was saying, but skill sets of all of you been saying. Any sense there's going to be a real difference in what we're learning now that will lay the foundation for a bigger focus on training going forward, not just at security officer level, Glenn, but at different levels? What's your insight? You're probably the best person in the world to ask this question to, actually. Glenn Kittering.
Well, a couple of panelists have already indicated, Sandy just mentioned that we're probably going to see a reduction in budgets, and I firmly believe in that as well. Part of that is because we're going to see more and more average workers working from home, and so particularly in the large commercial real estate market, I think you're gonna see buildings start to empty out. And so there is going to, I do believe there's gonna be a real push to reduce budgets. There's different ways that the industry can respond to this. And one is they can just slash the size of their departments, or just wholesale and just try to do more or the same with less, or they can cut the personnel, but the ones who are left over, they can invest in training. And like what I envision, what I'm seeing already is like a tiered security, you know? I mean, if you want a junior guard to pay the lowest rate and they're only going to provide you with X amount of services, then that's what you're going to get. But and then a tier 2 and so on and so forth. I think we may end up going to that, but I also think what's going to drive this is obviously the continued impact of technology on security, the way it's impacted everybody else. And we're going to simply have to have more sophisticated and highly trained security personnel who can take advantage of all the technology. Because right now, a lot of that technology is being wasted because the salaries have not kept up, and the training is not kept up. And then again, the people working from home, the IT infrastructure is going to have to be built up. And I think there's also going to be a greater demand for IT practitioners, but again, there's going to be more training required for them. And I mean, to me, that's best case scenario. Worst case is you're just going to see budgets cut across the board. And then I think the industry, if we don't rise to the challenge, then we're just going to be taken advantage of, so to speak. And we're going to let the situation control us instead of us controlling the situation.
Okay, thank you. Declan, a question here from Rosary Meehan, who makes the point that the situation with governments is very similar to the situation with clients. They've both, in a sense, been seen to underappreciate often what security does, with great exceptions, of course. There are many great clients and government activities, as Glenn has said out there. What Rosary is suggesting is that what we need is more champions, and to champion the security sector in different sectors. So I wonder whether, with your sort of global hat on, where we where we might look to get champions of security that are really going to make a difference at the highest level. And can I just remind you before you answer, Declan, can I ask people to make sure they use the question and answer button to ask questions? They're coming thick and fast. We've got time for a couple more. Declan, your thoughts on that champion bit, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic idea. I think maybe to go back to the government and the client issue, I think this is probably where the biggest issue is. If we look at, and again, I'm only generalizing here because there is some really, really good security companies out there, really good buyers of security, but they tend to always push to the bottom line and they want the cheapest service. I think the champions are the buyers of security. They're the government themselves. They're the large security companies that provide these services. These are the ones that need to push back. The general mantra that happens within the security sector tends to be get a contract, build a contract, move to the other contract. And this tends to also be another issue, because if you look at the government interest is in the public interest, and the security guarding companies are in the interest of their shareholders, make as much money as I can. So there's also an issue there. So these things have to be challenged and also recognized. But the champions for me are the buyers of security. You need some big players to come out and say, if we want the best people, and what we have to remember is this is a people business. So all the technology in the world that's out there doesn't drive security. It's the people that drive security. And when all these technologies fail and when all these systems fail, which they do, because that's what systems do, they don't always work, you come back to the people. So to invest in people, you need to pay more. And to pay more, we need these champions. For me, it's the buyers, the big players, the big buyers around the world, the big security companies around the world, at some stage need to say enough is enough. And we tend to give in to the regulators, because it has almost become that the regulators are beginning to run the security sector, and the regulators are government. So the regulators need to get involved in this as well. So the champions for me are the buyers, the regulators, and the providers of security. These are the key people.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Neil, I'm going to come to you next. And we go to a new normal. And of course, people are talking about that in very general terms without knowing clearly what it is. But it's going to likely involve people working from home and a new type of relationship between people in workplaces, at least for the foreseeable future. I'm just thinking through, both for the security sector itself and its clients, to what extent this is going to impose a radical change or a gradual next step in terms of how the security sector adjusts. I'm thinking here about the way the new environment might work. Neil, your thoughts on how you see that and how you see the potential for the security sector to relate to it?
I think, as Glenn mentioned, the reduction in people coming into buildings will have impact. I think it's going to be hearts and minds, I think, bringing back people into the workplace. And I think we play an important part of that, making people feel comfortable. They may not have been to their offices for 2 months. Our role is to make that they feel extremely safe when they come into that environment. They may not be comfortable on public transport, but when they come to a property that we're looking after for our clients, that we've got to make sure that that's the most comfortable experience they get apart from being at home. So that's really our part to play in that. And we need to, as an industry, make sure all of our teams are aware what that will feel like for our customers' employees. Working from home, from that perspective, I think as we've touched on with Declan, the other risks that are just not people-based, they are the cyber risks. And I know there's been a lot of communication out about the phishing attempts that have been going on during that period. So I think there is more than just the people, the staffing. I think there is a lot of technology that will be able to adapt and flex to the new environments. Electronic measures so that you can close certain areas or stop access when a certain amount of people have been through certain doors. Obviously, lifts is going to be an area of intrigue of how we deal with people in lifts and keep social distancing in those sorts of areas. So I think there's lots still to be looked into. I think from the security industry, and I think going back to quality companies, it's about having ideas, engaging with your customers, and making sure that you're coming up with what you think you can do, and coming up with ideas and suggestions. I just wanted to touch on one thing, Martin, just talking
very quickly, if I could, Neil, very quickly.
It was just about customers. I've only seen very positive feedback from our customers, especially with regards to reviewing pay. I've heard some very encouraging signs of people didn't realise what the security guys did, and they've really kept the building going. So I'm really pleased that there's been some strong recognition of that.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm just going to come to Rod. So that question, by the way, was informed by Leander Fernandez and Doug Edwards, who sent one in advance. Let me just very quickly ask for a comment from you next, Glenn. And it's from Rod Cowan, who's talking about security managers. And in terms of champions, of course, they're in a pivotal position. There's been a lot of talk over many years across countries that they're the problem. I wonder whether I could just, ask you for a comment on this. I'm going to ask you to be brief, Glenn, because we're getting near the end. About security managers lack the training, lack the expertise, and unless we get that right, we're always on the run. True or not true?
Yes and no. I mean, we don't have standards, but what I'm seeing is that whether it's the security managers or the directors or the CSOs, these people are providing this trusted advisor role to a lot of corporations right now, as every organization out there is negotiating its way through this entire pandemic. And they're relying on their security managers, and they have a lot of expertise to provide. And I think that's really, really underappreciated right now.
Okay, Sandy, a very quick comment. Well, actually, I'll see what I'm going to do. Sandy, I'm going to come to you first. I'm going to ask you each for a final comment about this subject. 30 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, each of you. Sandy first, your thoughts on perhaps a bit about security managers and the role they play in taking this to the next stage in the post-virus world. Sandy Davies, your final comments, please.
As it relates to the security managers or security directors, I feel that in the past they have not provided opportunities to advance their employees, the people that work for them directly under them, that I think that they have to put a special emphasis now to bring them up the ladder, let them have opportunity. I think that that's going to be critical. In years past, we've seen that they have not wanted to do this for whatever reason, because job security, they didn't want the officers to have a greater opportunity to build their career. So I think that I ask that the security managers and directors get beyond that, bring them up, raise the bar for your officers. I'm just going to conclude with saying one thing, and I think it's a very important statement here, is quality security is not expensive, it's priceless. And I think that should resonate in everybody's mind.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandy. Nice final comment. Declan, your final comments, please.
Martin, I think Sandy's comments have been kind of hit the nail on the head. The security manager is arguably the catalyst for change in all of this. If the security manager, directors, etc., are the leaders and they're not leading the security guards by showing them the correct direction and engaging in positive learning and engaging in professional development and showing people that this is a career and this is a place that you should work, I think it's sending the wrong message. And historically, we know this, but arguably, again, I go back to the people that buy security need to probably look at what they're buying. You need to understand the security sector more. And the security manager role has become a management discipline, but not necessarily recognized by a lot of organizations as a management discipline. But just to finish on it, I think that the hires of security and people that buy it don't actually know what security management is. So in a contemporary world, and what it's going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think they need to shape that in order to shape the rest of their environment.
Declan, thank you very much indeed. Glenn, your final thoughts, just 30 seconds, please, maximum, on the potential of security to play a bigger role going forward. What's going to be the catalyst for that, finally?
Well, the post-COVID world is going to take years to recover from, and this is the opportunity for security managers to help lead and provide advice to their senior management on how to do this. And they need to step up. It's that simple. They need to be prepared for the long run, and some will succeed and some will unfortunately fail.
Thank you very much indeed, Glenn. And the final comment I'm going to leave to you, Neil. and your final thoughts on where we go from here. Just 30 seconds, please.
I think we've all mentioned the same thing, and I'd agree with that. It's leadership. I think it's from the top, and going back to the respect of the government, I think that would be good to come from there. And my experience of dealing with the police, when you get their leadership involved, things start to happen. I think people work together a lot better. So I think it is about that, and totally agree. Leadership from all directions, and of course, the managers on the ground that are actually making it happen are crucial to that respect and the drive of the security teams.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed to my panel for their insightful comments. I hope you found that useful. Good to get different views from around the world. What they do share is this commitment to things being better. My thanks to CIS for Security for sponsoring this, and for our supporters for enabling this to happen. And if you'd like to get involved with us, you know where we are, do contact us. Finally, just to remind you that when we talk about making things better, I think one of the key things that's happening around the world is that there's a global way in which we can recognize those who are truly good at what they do. And on your screen in front of you, you've got the Auspus nomination places where it's open. And I would like to ask every single one who's watching today and listening today, if they could make one nomination of one team or one company or one individual or one initiative or one aspect of security they think is outstanding, recognise it at the Auspus. And then just to let you know that we go through it all again on Thursday, every Tuesday and Thursday. And on this Thursday, 3:30 British Summer Time, patterns of fraud, cyber and economic crime during the crisis. What do we do now? Our guests will include representatives from the Netherlands, from Australia, and from the United Kingdom. And just to let you know, we've got an up and coming new set of webinars that start on the 5th of May, every Tuesday and Thursday, same time. They're all on the website. I hope you will feel able to join us. Today's webinar will be available on our website as from tomorrow, and indeed on our YouTube channel, Security in Crime. Once again, thank you very much indeed to CIS for sponsoring, to our supporters, to all of you for asking questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, especially our panel, who I thought gave you some really good thoughts from the front line. And wherever you are in the world, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and stay safe.